Welcome to Sex, Lies, and Blank Pages with our special guest, Isaac Marion.
Yay.
Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome. So
It's-
excited to have you here.
It is. This is very exciting. Do you want to tell the audience to start just a little bit about who you are?
Sure. So I wrote a series of books, which most people would just know the first one, Warm Bodies, which was made into a movie in 2013. It was kind of like my calling card to this day. I'm working on moving on, but it hasn't really happened yet. And that's kind of my main thing. And I have, a little bit of music here and there, a little art and whatnot, and a YouTube channel, but mostly books has been my thing.
And go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Stacy.
Oh, and trying to build a house in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
That's your thing. Your little tiny house. You've had some issues with it though, I think, right?
Yeah, it's been a strange adventure. I've been kind of moving further and further away from civilization in stages, from Seattle to a log cabin off on Orcas Island to now I'm in, the far reaches of Eastern Washington desert, basically up on a big plateau, and arrived here with nothing, like just empty land, and step by step, well, water, septic, all that stuff, putting it in, and while living here at the same time. So it's now
you're getting ready for the zombies to come. You're prepared.
Yeah, I don't think they would have any reason to come out here, so I'm not too worried about it.
You're safe.
Yeah.
I'm curious because this is primarily romance that we talk about, even though we've had guests who write thrillers, like Alexandre Terray. But would you, because I know I haven't read the books. I'm so sorry. I've only watched the movie and loved it at the time. And I actually, I obviously watched it before I even knew you were going to be on this podcast. So when I heard your name, I was like, hold on. And it literally clicked. I was like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. I would classify it as a romance. Would you, though, classify? Oh, there's a cat. You guys can't see. Okay, there is. So for those of us listening and not being able to see, a cat just popped up on the screen. And I'm really happy.
He goes nuts.
Yeah.
He loves to dramatically crash the interview that. Derail
Cats are
whatever
like that,
topic.
right?
Yeah.
It's not about them. They're like, oh, make it about me.
Yeah,
How would you classify it? How would you classify Warm Bodies?
That's been the big question of my whole career in publishing, and had been asked by my publisher many times, and how do we classify this and what do we do with this? Because there are, I think it's kind of different things to different people, because I can see the argument for the romance aspect. I never thought of it in any particular genre when I wrote it. It was just kind of a thing that I wanted to do, and then after finishing it, I realized oh, people really want me to label this somehow, and so it's been a challenge. I think I wouldn't consider it, I don't think it fits neatly in any single genre, maybe a blend, there's certainly an element of romance in it, but I guess it depends on what your expectations are for specific genres. I don't think it follows the expectation of traditional, heavily genreified romance, but there's a bit of that in there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And a lot of movies, series, pretty much all consumable content have a love story aspect to it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people just want something boxed. They want to know, what am I getting before I open it? And so many of us artists, we're like, we don't write like that. That's not how sometimes it works. A story doesn't normally always come with, tropes and, so I write the same way. I'm like, I don't really think of it. It just comes that way. So I can see where you're and do you find that most people probably have seen, especially Warm Bodies, the movie, with the book, how much interaction did you have creating that? And did you have a lot of say in the script, or how much did it stay close to what you feel is the book?
I wouldn't say I had say in it, but I had input. They consulted me at various stages of the pre-development, and then when they actually started writing the script, I talked to the director/writer before we started, and then he sent me a few drafts of the script that I could give comments on, but it was all kind of optional feedback. They could take or leave it. So I said I did my best to kind of guide it in the direction that I liked, and then they took some of it and didn't take others, and it ended up being kind of a pretty decent hybrid. I think, as far on its own terms, I think the movie's great. I love the movie. It's not, it's not a direct translation of the book, of course. They almost never are, but it's close enough that I've been able to embrace it and feel like I can go along with this party, enjoy it, even though it's not the movie I would have made, of course, but that's probably why I don't get to make movies, because no one would watch the movie I wanted to make.
Well, let's not box ourselves in, because you never know. I mean, that could be amazing. But were you able to be on set?
I was in the movie a little bit.
Wait,
I was
were
actually,
you?
I'm gonna have
I
to
was
watch
sup-
it now and like
I'm-
rewatch it.
It's like me and Scream, where people constantly go back to Scream. I'm
Yeah.
like, no, we gotta watch that.
I'm barely in it, but there's a scene where they walk through the metal detector at the airport, and I'm
Okay.
walking by in the background. I'm a zombie, and
Oh,
Like
and-
Stan Lee. Wasn't it's Stan
Well,
Lee
yeah.
who was in the back of all of his movies, right?
Oh, he's
they
in
get
every one of his
actual
movies.
cameos,
Yeah.
whereas
Yeah.
mine was just I was just an extra walking by. But I'm the only extra in the background of that scene, so you can tell, you can, if you're looking for it.
Yeah.
They did the whole, star close-up version of the zombie makeup for me, so it's extremely detailed. It took hours, incredibly painful, and then you can't even
Yeah.
see my face. It's like blurred in the background, but still counts. And I just
Hollywood.
got to hang out there. I stayed on set for about 2 or 3 weeks and just like watched and soaked it up. It was an incredible
Yeah.
experience.
I was just first gonna say, like, there's this idea as authors that we all want that. Like, that is the end all be all dream. I think even after, like, getting apart was like that dream. And people forget there's a story after. There isn't like in Disney, like she lived happily ever after, the end, So you had that huge up of right away. It was your debut novel, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then to get right away a movie where people, like, we all dream of that. And then there was sort of now, like, how did you feel like the after was in real life? Like that, almost like a crash, you feel like you worked really hard on the second book and third book to get it out. And it's like, this is what's reality, is like, it isn't the end after you get a movie.
Yeah, unless the movie was some kind of just overwhelming smash hit where you make millions, then it's not over. You got to keep going on to the next thing, because you get enough money for a few years, but then you got to do something new and got to keep it going. So yeah, but surprisingly, the movie momentum doesn't last as long as you might hope. It was a great 2 or 3 years of like feeling on top of the world, and then it's like, okay, what's next? And it just kind of dissipates rapidly. The amount of goodwill you build up does not carry you as far as I originally thought it would. It's kind of a wake-up call for me.
And they never wanted to like think about, oh, this did so well, we want the second one, or it was already like, we're good.
They did. I mean, it's been a strange journey with the movie side of that thing, because it's come so close to happening again so many times. They like had a deal in development for a sequel film, and it got so far as to be kind of like leaked into the press and everything, and then it kind of fell apart for reasons that I never get to know, because they just things happen behind the scenes and like, it's not working out. So, and then if year passed or something, and then it was like, hey, we're doing a TV show now, and they announced it. It was in the trade magazines and everything. And it's like, Warm Bodies TV show is in production, and then it's like
that would be good, a
crickets.
series.
Yeah. And now it's still happening technically. I mean, they keep trying new approaches to it, and they've revived it again recently since the writer's strike ended. So things could still happen, but it's all totally out of my hands. Like the film side of it is a distant world to me. They check in with me once in a while, but just to kind of let me know what they're up to. But it's complicated beyond my knowledge of why things don't happen. Sometimes they don't even know. Someone will just ghost them all of a sudden. So.
I was in acting in Hollywood, and like the thing that to me, it more surprises me that things get made than things don't get made, because it is just there's so many people, there's so many players, there's so much money, people, like, it's just, sometimes it's just like, I'm surprised anything gets made in Hollywood, honestly. So
I think of that stuff as just like, when it happened the first time, it was out of nowhere, fantasy dream kind of thing that changed my life. And if it were ever to happen again, it would just be that, of fantasy again. And I'm not relying on it. I don't certainly not making any plans based off that, but I'm just kind of happy to have it in the back of my mind. It's just maybe someday could come back. Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm just kind of grinding along, and in the normal author life, when you don't have a movie, of just like writing.
So that ties in a little bit to what I was wondering. It seemed like that was a very high. Do you have any low lows?
Every day.
but we're authors.
Wow. What a question. We're going straight to the rock
Yeah.
bottom, huh?
We asked multiple authors this, I promise.
I mean, it depends on what scale are we talking, like daily or yearly, like
Both,
what
both.
kind of
Whatever
lows?
scale, whatever is resonating for you. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the lows have been a process. I mean, it's when you start out kind of at, it's not the top, the peak, but it's the realistic peak for any debut, what the best you could really hope for. And then it can't be anything but a downhill from there, really, unless you're just incredibly lucky. So coming to terms with like, well, life's not going to be like that anymore, and then finding out that the momentum from a first book in a series, for example, does not carry over very long at all, and writing more books in the series and just kind of watching it like dissipate into the ether. I was like, wow, I really thought that people cared about this, but it only turns out only a very small amount of people do.
There are a lot of statistics about series also, and that 6 and 8 is when a lot of them really take off and get longevity. Just so you know.
Really? Okay, so
Yeah,
if I
not that
write
I'm-
5
yeah.
more,
Exactly. Yeah.
5 more.
Yeah.
I think I'm good.
No
on that.
pressure.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't think I'll ever write a series again, having had that experience. I'm like,
Really?
no,
Wow.
it's a really depressing experience and it's almost inevitable. I mean, statistically, it's pretty much 99% of series have diminishing returns. Like a lot of people show up for the first one, and that's the one everyone will talk about. And even if it is a really successful series, it's still the first one that everyone knows. And then the other ones are kind of like afterthoughts. And you always get fewer people will finish the series than will read the first one. So it's like you put all this heart and soul into the rest of the story, which to me, it's not like adding additional, it's not like add-ons to the story. It's like, no, this is the story. Like the first book is the first chapter, second one is the second chapter. Like you haven't really seen the story if you haven't read the whole series. So to me, the last book is the most important one. It's where like it's the climax of the story. It's where everything comes together, and that's always the one that the least amount of people read. So it's a losing proposition writing series like this, I find.
I love
Better
series,
to cram
but
it
yeah,
all
but that
into.
is yeah.
As a reader, I love them. I mean, I would
Yes,
love
exactly same.
but as a
Binging.
writer, it sucks.
Mhm. Okay, yeah.
And totally fair, but I'm wondering if though, like in a series, like I found like my series got popular, people kind of like only want that. And are you finding that kind of same thing where you can't, like you want to move on to different stories and people just go like, well, that's great, but when is, I want to hear more about the warm bodies characters or, I find a lot of people kind of like stick you in time, like a certain story.
Yeah.
They don't want to see much else from you.
Well, that's what we're about to find out, because the book that I'm shopping around right now is a new thing, and we'll see if my existing readers will show up for it. So
That's
fingers
very
crossed.
exciting. Is there any? Yeah. Is there
Nice
anything
little
that?
tease.
Yeah, exactly. It was. Is there anything that you can tell us about it, or anything that you think the readers who are listening should dive in and read from you?
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret. I've been posting about the story for a while. So if you want to Google around, there's synopses out there, kind of what I've been willing to leak so far. But it's basically it's a more grounded kind of story. It basically in the real world, there are no zombies or monsters or anything like that. So if that's a requirement for interest, you'll have to check it out. But it does have some weird twists. It's basically a story about a technology that kind of changes the world by making everything kind of hyper connected, but there's a side effect that just creates noise, like audible noise that gradually gets louder and louder as the years go on. And it's kind of about this little group of musicians trying to adapt to kind of the changes in the world as basically one by one, like the sensory pleasures and art sort of gets sidelined for the sake of what this technology brings to society. So it's like it's a kind of a dark one. It's kind of bleak, and yet
I thought that was a rom-com.
I'm sitting here like he's speaking my language.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much like about kind of the world we find ourselves in right now, like especially as artists, of all, I chose music as a as a way into this idea, but it's happening across the board pretty much to all kinds of creatives are finding that just like the metaphorical noise of the world is drowning everything out, and it's just so hard to do any of those things anymore in the landscape we're in. So in the story, it's a literal noise, and you kind of explore like how the world changes over time as just things that are related to hearing kind of have to be sidelined little by little, and it's kind of this creeping, insidious presence in the world.
The noise is AKA AI.
Yeah.
Among other things, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Like that.
Yeah,
That is.
sounds-
So you're shopping it around right now?
Yeah, it's out in the hands of publishers as we speak, waiting for a verdict.
Well,
That's
publishers, if
exciting.
you're listening, pick it up. We want
Yes.
it.
Yes,
Yeah,
please
I wanna
do.
read
Please
it.
do.
I need to know the
Definitely.
ending, so this has to be
Yeah.
published because I have to read this. So
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of Warm Bodies was the same deal where I approached the story with a personal crisis in my life, and then I basically figured out my stance and my way of processing that crisis by writing those books. And by the end of it, I was like, okay, I think I've reached the conclusion for myself, and which is then the character's conclusion. And it was the same thing with this book. I'm like, how am I gonna live in this world, basically? Like how do I respond to a world that is just kind of rapidly running away from the things that I care about and the things that I'm passionate about doing? And like, I don't think that it's certainly not possible for me to change it. So what am I going to do with it? And
How do we adapt?
kind of a
Yeah.
little therapeutic process of running through that simulation with fictional characters and get to the end, like, okay, I guess that's where I'm at. So
I like to
All right.
say writing is my therapy. It kind of sounds like for you, it might be a little bit of therapy for you as well.
definitely.
Yeah. And
It's,
speaking of that, can we go back to like how you even started? Like, was writing always your thing? Were you the kid that was writing in school? Like, why did you choose writing? Or did it choose you? Oh.
I finally got the idea when I was 14. I've heard my whole life, since I was a little kid. Before that, I was trying to figure out what the thing was that I could use to just scratch that itch to be able to share what was in my mind. And I went through lots of like random hobbies trying to find it. And for some reason it took me that long because I was an avid reader, and I just kind of thought like, well, only authors can write books. I'm not an author. So like when I was 14, I just had this story that I'd been tinkering with, and just kind of hit me like, why not write this as a book? And started doing it. And it just quickly found that was kind of the outlet I've been searching for, was just like a way to take what the daydreams and floating around in my head and kind of the imaginary landscapes and transfer them to other people. It's the most direct way to do that. There's no interfering medium at all. It's kind of just like thought to thought. So that's why I kind of chose that as my primary outlet, as opposed to, music and painting and all the other stuff that I've dabbled in.
So what happened to that book when you were 14?
It's buried forever, except for like the very highest tier on my Patreon can read it.
Oh, that is
Right.
excellent. And
because
what
it's
is your
incredibly embarrassing, and I'm like, well, you have to pay me a lot to read this.
Like, I love how you're like, oh, it took me that long. You're like at 14. I'm like, dude, I was like in my 30s before I started writing.
Well, I mean, it takes longer to actually, get good at it, of course, and to like get published and whatever. But it just, I just funny that it took me that long to make the connection between the thing that I loved consuming, and I was reading all these books, and I just never thought like, why not try it writing one? Like, I guess most people do find that later in life, but I'm not really sure why.
Yeah.
For our readers listening, could you just let us know the name of your Patreon so it's very easy for them to find it?
Well, it's just patreon.com/Isaac Marion, I think.
Perfect.
But if
So it's just your
it's
name.
on my website, it's my name. Patreons don't really have names. It's just me. So, but yeah, if you go to my website, which is isaacmarion.com, or basically any link that I have has the little hat held out. So,
Now, like, I'm determined to find out what 14-year-old mind of yours.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, I think there are like 4 people who ever actually read it, and of course they didn't finish it because it's, awful, of course.
Well, I'm
But
not sure that, like, they do say your first, well, they, as in there's a psychologist what is her name? She was at RAM and she was also at RWA, but she says your first works are your ID. And she specifically is a professor who works on fan fiction and the cultures around it and the fan bases around it. And she says that the first works that you have are often very addictive and readers are very attached to it because they contain your ID. It's something with your psyche. Even though they might be difficult to market or they're not written the best. But there is
yeah,
a lot to be said about the first works. So don't put
I
yourself
have
down.
it's really just the execution that is embarrassing to me because it's just so overwrought and it's so teenage. And, of course, I was 14,
Emo and
but,
yeah.
but it's at the same time, I do actually still like the ideas in it. It's very like high fantasy, kind of like really, really wacky fantasy realm. And it's not something I would get back into now, but I have kind of had this fantasy of my own of kind of like pulling a Stephen King where I take the book I wrote 30 years ago and just after I'm like well established, write the Dark Tower series or something where it's like something that I've earned my place to indulge in that again.
Yep.
That's
So someday
exactly what I
maybe.
was thinking. When you said that it was
I was
buried, I
like,
was like, no, it's
you go
not. I
back.
was like, it's coming
It's
back.
not done.
Good.
It's
I
not done.
still think about it.
Yeah.
See, after that long, that means it's still a story that needs to be told.
Of course, all the stuff that I was very fresh and original in like whenever that was 1990 something is now totally played out. So I'd have to rethink everything. At the time I was like,
Yeah,
wow.
flip phones and
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it would be retro now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, it kind
I
of
mean,
would
you
be.
could go with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in prepping for this interview, I stumbled on your poetry book. I believe it's called Hopes and Fears.
Yeah.
And I saw it on your Instagram. That's where I first saw anything about it. And I told Stacy, we were speaking earlier, and I said that can you explain it to us a little bit about it? But I just want to tell you this really quick. I was reading through your the poems that you made, and I believe it was called Starship. Is
Yeah.
that the name? I sat and cried. I
She's not a
cried over
crier.
that, and
Not
I'm
a
not a
crier.
crier. I do not cry over anything. That was so beautifully done. I was awed, and I went and purchased your book from that. Can you
Wow.
tell us where you came up with this idea and basically what it is and where you came up with the idea?
Well, that book is it really only exists because of my Patreon because one of years ago one of my perks on my Patreon was I would allow like invite people to send me like things that they were worrying about and or it was called Hopes and Fears. They could say hopes, but most of them ended up being fears, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
There's a few hopes in there, but yeah, it was just kind of like send me something that's on your mind and I will use it kind of as a writing prompt to write a poem about it and kind of attempt to not really like solve their problem. It's not really advice per se, but just like something that I feel might be inspiring or encouraging, comforting in some way. So all the poems in this book are a response to something that someone sent me. And so it starts with a quote from what they sent me. And then there's the poem in response to it. So yeah, all of the ideas are basically prompted by real people. So that one I believe was someone talking about their chronic illness and just kind of like the difficulties of like being in a body and being alive. And so yeah, that was the inspiration for that poem about like thinking of your body as kind of a vast, luxurious vehicle that we get to the privilege of owning. Despite
Mine's
its
more of
malfunctions.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's more
kind
of
of
a
a clunker.
Toyota.
Yeah, there's plenty of clunkers.
Camry.
But it's like even a Rolls Royce breaks down once in a while.
Can I just, first of all, so you don't do this anymore?
I don't do that Patreon prompt thing because it was just too much. It became my whole writing project while I was doing that. And while if I between projects I can afford to do kind of side tracks like that, but I'm not doing it currently.
Mm-hmm.
I do still write random poems sometimes, but they're just ones that I think up, and eventually I might have enough of those to put out like a proper, like a normal poetry book. But it's kind of a background hobby.
It's pretty
Yeah, but
brilliant also,
Yeah,
like
It
very
is.
brilliant marketing to establish the community and connect with readers while also working and
Yeah.
profiting from it in multiple ways and pushing yourself further. So I just personally, I love that you did that. I also have a Patreon and I'm now thinking, not that I would do
Yeah.
poems though, but something
Yeah.
like asking them to, you know, throw me something that like, in some
Yeah.
aspect, 'cause it's brilliant. That's a
It's
very,
a really beautiful connection too
Yes.
with people.
Mhm.
and I
Yeah, I
think it
really
really
enjoyed
helps
that.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoyed the part of it of the kind of almost collaborative feeling of it, where it was like not just me. I was at a point where I'm sick of talking about my own life. I'm sick about my own thoughts. I want to interact with someone else for a change. And so that was the genesis of that idea. And then I found it just so rewarding to what just to see the results that came out, and then to see their reactions to it, and to like some of them seemed to be genuinely helped by it, or at least touched by the thought of it. And yeah, it's I don't know if I ever do get, time to indulge in poetry again, that might be my ongoing vehicle for it, because it definitely feels like it's a little more direct. With traditional poetry, it's kind of like it's a little harder to make the case that it has meaning, because it's so insular. It's oftentimes ends up being so like hard for other people to parse. And this is like much more kind of for the people, so to speak.
It's
literally,
very connecting.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Have that just that thought. I feel like I just keep hitting with questions, but just that thought. Have you found connection in community, from your readers?
Definitely.
Yeah,
It's pretty much the only community I have these days. I'm living out in the
Yeah,
middle of
because
the
I was like,
wilderness.
you're
yeah,
really by yourself out there, right?
Yeah, just me and that cat. Oh, he's gone.
He's
Yeah.
like, see ya.
He
I'm
left.
out."
Yeah, I mean, that was actually a big part of why I wanted to do a Patreon. I mean, of course, like money is nice too, but it was just like being able to kind of cultivate that community in a more direct way, because it's like there's a lot of stuff that I don't really want to offer the general public. I'm kind of, I'm not that private. Like I share a lot of stuff online, but there's kind of a layer where like I don't want to just put this out like to be dissected by the masses, but it feels a little
Mhm.
different when you're sharing it to kind of an inner circle. And
Yeah.
even though money is the mechanism of that filtering, but it's like, well, if they care enough to subscribe to something, then they like are kind of an ally by definition. So like it like creates a space where I can be a bit more open and vulnerable than I probably would be on like a very public platform, which has been really wonderful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that readers also like to have that connection and like to support. So, and they obviously can't help you write anything, but if they can be there for the couple of bucks and in response you're writing and you're sharing it
Mhm.
with them, like that is, I
They
think it's
do
just a
help me
win all
write
the
it
way around. Yeah.
just by being there, because it's like, oh, people do still care. So
Yeah.
I have a tangible reminder every month that people still care.
Mhm. I don't
Yeah,
know
because
how,
this is,
oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just like, this is a very lonely business. Sometimes it's
It
very
is.
singular. So sometimes
Yeah.
we're still human though. So we do need that interaction. Sometimes I forget, like I need to talk to people, and then how much it helps me even get back to writing when I'm like, okay, this is great to see that people still care. They want to know what I'm doing, because I'm like, they
Yeah.
don't care. Why would they care? It's
Yeah.
crazy. They really do.
Writing books is very uniquely isolating in that way, because not only is it done in total isolation, it's just you and your computer working, but the gaps of time between reward and satisfaction of interacting with an audience are just so huge. I mean, you can work on a book for years, and then it takes a year to be published, and it's like massive amounts of time where nothing is happening, no one's talking to you, it's just like empty space, and then you get all this flood all at once, and then it's another big desert. So it's like it's hard to kind of budget your your sense of connection over these long gaps
Yeah.
of time.
So true. I don't know how people like Stephen King and Danielle Steele, like the very prolific authors prior to social media, it's had to have been difficult for them to keep going and being as productive as they were. Because like Stacey said, like it very much fills up your cup when you have like 4 people message you that they love this book, they can't wait for the next. You're like, oh, me either. And
Mhm.
whereas they didn't get that.
Back then, probably what they did get is
Handwritten
a
letters.
publishing industry
Yeah.
that actually has resources and
Sort of,
cares
yeah.
and sends them on
Yes.
tours and does
Mhm.
events and they
Yeah.
interact with the crowds in real life. So
Yeah.
they
Pros and
probably had
cons.
that.
Yeah.
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 Honestly, I would prefer that, but here we are. So,
Yeah.
And if they really hated your book, they took time to write you a letter.
Yeah, yeah.
They sent you a letter.
Oh, we have
Yeah.
strong opinions about the negatives in the industry.
I'm sure
and not,
you do.
yeah, I know, and not to go
As I literally sip tea.
I know, right? How I'm
Right.
guessing like just dealing with the negative is probably just focusing, just picking up your energy. I imagine you deal with the negative by blocking it out and focusing on the positive.
That's probably accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, I've blocked pretty much everything out by where I live. I mean, I wish my window was behind me right now so you could see my environment, because I'm just on a plateau surrounded by wasteland as far as I can see.
And it's dark out, like right now.
Yeah, it's dark too.
We're in the same area, so you just look out, it's just rainy and dark.
Yeah.
On the business aspect of this, because we've seen it over the last few years, have you considered tapping into that TikTok audience and sending influencers copies of like, you know, a special edition or a signed copy, and just ask them, you know, if you're interested or you'd love this, you know, I would love, you know, for you to just enjoy it, and potentially getting that reach and that audience and that you know, that life into that, obviously the first in series, which will then trickle into your others with read through. But we have seen in the last few years a lot of older titles and authors who seem to be on a decline really like get new life.
I've heard about that from the point of view of authors being on TikTok and like telling their story or whatever, and it goes viral. But I haven't really thought about the secondhand version of that, about just trying to reach out to people who do have a big audience. I feel like I probably won't do it. It's too far of a stretch for me to immerse myself in that culture to the point where I would even know who to contact.
True.
It's TikTok is exhausting. I do have an account, and I tried to really like lean into it for a little while, and I had a few videos that a few of them actually were pretty popular, but it's a very kind of anti-social platform. I find like
Very negative.
even compared to Instagram, it's just the culture of it. It does not seem to welcome like dialogue. That people don't really comment on posts. It's just kind of like content flashing and then it disappears. And maybe it's different in certain niches of it, but yeah.
They do have some algorithms that are more positive, but it takes time to not only see the content, but to then be a part of that content and then to build that community. But yeah, you can go down some pretty awful rabbit holes on TikTok.
Especially book talk, yeah.
Yeah,
Especially
yeah,
TikTok right now.
Yeah, you can use the block button a lot on that one.
It is exhausting. It takes a lot of energy to handle those kind of social media outlets, especially TikTok.
Yeah, I'm more focusing on YouTube at the moment because it's all the other platforms are just so suffocating. I feel like the way that they're set up, how short everything is, and how, you know, it's all vertical screen, it's just ultra compressed. Like I can't breathe when I'm on those platforms. It's just like I want to tell a story, but I have 30 seconds to say everything, and it's just too rapid. And also the interaction of it is just different. Like you can, on YouTube, it's more of like you can type out a whole conversation on your keyboard instead of, you know, sitting there trying to squeeze in a little comment in 60 characters or whatever you get. So it feels a little more human to me, and I've been enjoying that different flavor. It's new to me. I've never really delved into YouTube until this year, so I'm kind of exploring that space after getting burnt out on all the little phone-based spaces.
It's interesting that YouTube is more, because that's the only social media platform that I don't look at my comments, because I'm told to go to hell so often.
Really?
Yes, and I'm called names. So I'm, you know, obviously advertising romance books, and I think the algorithm is just different, and there are apparently a lot of very religious men who think I'm a whore, so they don't mind telling me. I had a book that had a misprint, and inside was Leviticus. It was literally the Bible inside of my BDSM book.
The whole text of the book?
Yeah, the entire text.
Oh, wow.
It was cut, so you couldn't actually read. It wasn't actually the Bible. It was the interpretation of Leviticus, but it had the exact text and everything. And so I did a video on TikTok. Haha, that's so funny. La la la. Facebook, Instagram, whatever.
Ooh.
YouTube did not appreciate the sense of humor at all. And that's right. Like that is where I think I just got onto the wrong algorithm, and I stayed there, and it went viral. And I was just like, this isn't the viral that I asked for, God. Like,
it's a bad viral.
That one was bad. I got 3 good ones, 1 bad one.
I find that anytime anything goes viral, it's like my normal audience is pretty positive and supportive. Like when I just post normally, it so far, because none of my YouTubes have gone viral yet, they're all 100% positive. Nobody has a problem. But as soon as anything goes outside of your normal circle, it gets thrown to the wolves, and people come in like, "What's this? I don't know who this person is. I'm going to tear them apart."
Yeah, so they get off on that. They love being like, "Ooh, I'm gonna take them down."
And I guess it's like your content's being forced into circles that don't necessarily want it. So like whereas normally it's like people have signed up for it. But I'm intrigued by what happened to you, because that happened to me as well. Was this an Amazon book?
Well, they're all, I have them on Amazon. Oh, the printing, you mean? Yeah, I think it did come from, I have ordered from Ingram Sparks as well as Barnes & Noble Press.
Always Amazon.
There's always, well, I get them damaged from everywhere. But apparently it's like the sample book, like the first one they do isn't with your actual book, and they were supposed to throw it away. Like somebody told me in the comments, they work at the printing factory, and that's what they use, whatever was already on the press to make sure it's right. Bible. And it was, it was
right before.
Let me ask you though, was the Leviticus chapter something to do with your book in any way? Was it like,
there was
those
some
guys
stuff
that were
there was some stuff about
kind of thing?
It was very anti-sex, very anti, like it was, and I think that so I've gotten a few funny things from my Amazon boxes, and it's done locally here. So I do think the person might know me, because they think that
this happened to me with my poetry book. One copy, as far as I know, one that my brother happened to get, it's like twice as long as all the other ones, or 3-4 times. It's like a proper novel, because it has my poems for like the first third or so, and then right in the middle there's a Karl Marx manifesto, and then like a guide to like urban sabotage. And then it just goes right back to the poems.
Do you still have it?
Yeah.
I do. I have mine too. It's on my shelf. I was like, I can't get rid of this.
I was starting to wonder if they're just like discontented Amazon workers who are out there like seeding revolutionary material into the books that are being put out. But yours doesn't sound like very revolutionary. That sounds
no, and you can't even read it. Yeah. I knew that it was messed up for real. I knew that it was messed up because you could see on the spine or on the edge of the book. You could see that there were texts, and I was like, "What's wrong with this one?" Thank God I saw it, and it wasn't actually properly fitted, or else someone was going to get Leviticus.
What a surprise!
This one used whips and chains.
Yeah, that can't be a coincidence, right? You said
right?
You have a kind of a fan base of like angry conservative men who follow you around and putting Leviticus in your book. Yeah.
Literally, jokes on them because I loved it.
Probably one of the worst books in the Bible.
It is. I think it is. It's the one with the most contradictions to everything else. Yeah. Are there any other funny things that have happened, or highlights, or anything that you want to talk about just in our final minutes?
Well, that's a broad category of any funny things that have happened.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
funny right now.
I really enjoyed our last one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you'd have to narrow it down to a category, I think.
Any interactions that you've had that have really like stayed with you and still light up your heart? Any people you met?
Me at Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Which Comic-Con was this?
It was it had to be like 2014 in the Seattle Comic-Con. It was when it was the one that we were put up to like the 3rd floor, and they still had the signing people like on that 3rd floor with us, like the celebrities.
What was our panel?
No, we weren't on a panel. You came for the promoting the movie, and I was selling my books back there, and you were sitting there doing signings, and I came up and sat next to
Okay.
you like a dork.
Okay. All of those events are deleted from my brain the moment I walk out of there. It's nothing personal. I get so overwhelmed at these
It was
things
so
that when I
funny,
leave,
yeah.
I'm just catatonic for a few days, and it's all
Oh, I
wiped
don't-
away.
It's
Yeah.
draining.
Those
Yeah.
after that events, I like literally for a week
Yeah.
face first on my sofa saying, "Don't talk
Yeah.
to me ever again."
Yeah, talking to so many people, meeting so many people, it's so many social interactions. It's just like from 0 to 1,000 in one day.
Yeah.
So
And people forget we're kind of introverts, all of us. So that kind of
Yeah.
thing, like it's exhausting. We're
Yeah.
like, it's so. Well, it was great having you. Do you have any like, so it's just your website we can find you on? Like, where can we find you? Where can readers find you?
my website has links to everything that I do. It's isaacmarion.com, but is there I have a foot in every door pretty much. I mean, like I said, I'm on TikTok, but I hardly ever use it. The ones that I am actually active on is pretty much Instagram and YouTube. Instagram is kind of my just random pretty stuff and weird jokes and such. And then YouTube is kind of like more storytelling. And both those are kind of like the biggest window into my life. And of course, Patreon is the behind the window kind of insider track. And yeah, I'm just doing all that stuff and currently venturing into new territory. Recently got tapped to be the writer for a big video game that I can't talk about yet, but
Oh,
it's
that's what you were like, you were
Oh my
hoping you could by
gosh.
this point. Yeah.
So my
Yeah, I
husband,
still-
my husband is
can't
going
say
to
what
lose
it
his
is.
mind because he's, first of all, he's a huge gamer, and he also doesn't know that this is who I'm upstairs with right now.
when you put it that way, that sounds a little shady.
I am a romance author here now.
So we're always,
Yeah.
yeah,
Just
our
built
brains are
into your
always
blood.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to tell him that, you know, you were just up here, and by the way, and I obviously I'm
You
not going to
can't-
know anything
Can
about
you
it.
like hint at something that like obscure that we can think
Well,
about?
the thing is,
moreover?
I can't say anything about when I'm able to announce what the company is and what the game is, then there's content because they've already put out some teasers for what this game is about, but I'm not allowed to connect myself to it until they kind of like decide when to make their announcement because it's going to be like their first big update in a while. So I have to, all I've been able to say so far is that I'm in England. It's in Cambridge. And I've been going back and forth there to work with them. And some people I've talked to have just sort of sleuthed it out. I'm like, well, how many video game companies are there in Cambridge? But I still can't say which game I'm working on and all that. So hopefully soon. I think I missed something there.
No,
Someone dropped the joke.
I was pretending.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's a
exciting.
a new medium for me. It's just exciting. It's not, it's not the same as writing my own stories in a novel. It's not quite as liberating as that, but it's exciting in its own way. And it would be kind of like the next closest thing to having a movie made, really, to see your words on screen, whatever type of screen that may be. So
I mean, The Witcher was a book, then video game, then TV show.
Yeah, true.
And so are you, so I don't mean to extend this, but are you a gamer then?
Very casually. Like I play, it's like the absolute cream of the crop games that everyone raves about. I'll play those and
like WoW.
I can't do
Elden
online
Ring?
games.
Oh,
I can't do
okay.
anything that
Okay, sorry.
consumes my life to that degree.
Yeah.
I used to. That was actually
You
a
can't
game
commit to that.
kind of a predecessor to WoW called Asheron's Call back in the late 90s was the game that broke me. I was a big gamer as a kid, and then I started playing this MMORPG called Asheron's Call, and I just hit this point and realized this is destroying my life. Like this is all I'm doing. I'm 18 years old and I have my whole life ahead of me, and I'm spending way too much of it on this game. So I just like quit cold turkey from that moment and didn't do any games for the rest of my life until like 3 years ago or something. Then somebody sent me a PS4 and kind of tempted me back in and started
PS4. I'm still playing Pitfall over here.
Okay.
I'm a Sims person. I lost my life to the Sims. That's
yeah.
I don't want to start that like him. I would be like, no, I already lose so much of my life with scrolling and TikTok. I don't need.
I would be addicted.
It is a slippery slope.
It is.
Especially
Don't
with
start.
games like the Sims type games, like the kind of creative sandbox games is the ones that I tend to gravitate toward, because like a lot of people assume that I'd be into the really story heavy cinematic kind of games, but I'm like, well, that's what I do all day, and I kind of want to indulge something else. So I like these ones where you kind of get to build things and create worlds and like open world kind of exploration, because it's so I do get sucked into those even when they are offline. They still can be very addictive, and I have to watch myself, because it's a very tempting escape, especially when you're out here like living my life here. I recently, the last game I really sucked into was Fallout 4, which is set in kind of a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and you can build settlements, and so you're out there like on a landscape that looks exactly like where I live, like the gnarled brush and everything's dead, and you know, you can plant a well in the ground and build a little shack, and here I am like literally building a shack, putting a well in the ground. It's like so satisfying and tempting when you do it in the game. It's just like push a button, poof, it's there.
Like,
Meanwhile, I'm slaving away, so it's like a wish fulfillment when you're actually living this life, to do it in a virtual space where it's so easy and satisfying. So
virtual. If I mean, I love to live in worlds and be not part of this one, so I probably wouldn't come back out.
That is the danger. Unfortunately, we have to be in this one.
Well, it has been absolutely wonderful having you on. Everybody go follow Isaac and manifest. This book gets picked up because we need to read it. Yes, all the things.
All the things.
Thank you.